Many of us were hyped to the moon when the Resident Evil 2 remake was announced, with us having visions of the near-perfect Resident Evil remake being possibly matched in its success. The trailers looked promising, the characters and visuals looked fantastic, and the creatures we would face would give us nightmares for years to come. We couldn't wait to return to the iconic Midwestern town of Raccoon City and revisit the police station, sewers, and the underground lab. But come the release and eventual hours and days spent on gameplay, we started to notice the cracks. Something felt off as we started to scrutinise the plot and the logic of the game. And this all stems from two particular features of the original game which were neglected: the scenarios and the player zapping system. To understand this better, we would need to look at all 4 scenarios that take place in-game. Before we continue, please do subscribe to the channel to stay notified of new Resident Evil content. I mentioned that the player zapping system was neglected, which was confirmed by developers to have not been implemented, but how exactly would this affect the plot and gameplay? Surprisingly, quite a lot. Starting with the first encounter between Leon and Claire, we see them escape the petrol station in different positions, depending on which run you do first. Later they would reunite at the gate near the fire exit in the east wing of the RPD. But on both runs the bolt cutters are both in the stairwell and just outside the gate. Shortly after you get in, somehow the shutter where Elliot is eviscerated is open, even though whoever is doing the first run hasn't been in the basement yet. After that, we get to see Marvin in his zombie form before the first character's trip to the basement, and where Marvin was laid is Elliot's notebook with one page torn out. Just these few moments are enough to break the illusion of the scenarios. We knew player zapping wasn't going to be in the game, but it turns out that scenarios were not properly developed either, with identical key items being shared multiple times. The shared path of Leon and Claire, regardless of which scenario is being played, didn't help matters, with only a few minor differences between runs to help speed up gameplay. There are no unique boss fights except for the Super Tyrant and Alligator for Leon, and Birkin's Stage 4 form for Claire. The only exception is Birkin's final form in the second scenarios on the train, which makes little difference. Regardless of which character goes first, both characters fight the exact same boss fights, with those taking place in the second run seemingly just 10 minutes or more after the first character, leaving questions as to why the same enemies are being beaten twice. Something that breaks the story a lot is that regardless of which run you do, both characters take the exact same path as the first run once you head under the goddess statue, disregarding specific locations and events particular to each character, like the orphanage or the underground sewer area with the alligator. While the original game's events would be different between scenarios with key events and bosses swapped between runs, in the remake the runs play out identical apart from some moved key items to cut gameplay down by about half an hour at least, and the true ending being played out on the second run. Even the character who starts the train at the end of the game remains identical. Other events break the game's narrative too, with the death of Mr. X under the orphanage at the hands of William Birkin's second form, throwing in the problem of how does Mr. X appear in the sewers and the lab in Leon's campaign after being killed. The game's director ruled out multiple Mr. X tyrants, which would have been a better explanation than leaving the story with an unfinished thread. The helicopter crash not being explained is another niggling problem, but doesn't affect the overall plot too much. But an explanation of what brought it down would have been a great world-building opportunity that has been missed. The original game at least explained the helicopter crash and what caused the fire in the eastern wing of the RPD building. The 3 medallions, the chest plugs, and the lab ID tags being used by both characters was a bad oversight too. At least the original game tried to give the characters separate paths with different key items. Then there is the use of the 3 power blocks, with the characters sharing one of the 3 between them, when ideally in total 4 would be needed to allow both characters to get the garage passes from Ben's cell and Iron's private art collection. It isn't just item placement and usage between characters that can cause severe problems with the story. Even key moments with cutscenes can cause issues with the plot. One of the biggest being, how did Annette Birkin get a clean shot at Ada when Leon was stood directly between them on the bridge connecting the east wing to the central expanse of the lab? This is more of a staging issue than anything. If Leon had just been stood a little bit to one side, we wouldn't have this problem. But then again, how did Ada, a highly skilled spy, miss a fatally wounded R.E.T.I.N.A standing from a slightly elevated position only 15 feet away? At least the original had Ada shot from behind, which made sense. But the biggest problem comes in at the underground lab, when Leon tries to retrieve the G-Virus sample, or Claire tries to get the G-Virus cure. Now, the area where the G-Virus is kept is in a secure location that can only be opened by the Birkin family, so William, R.E.T., or Sherry with her pendant. In Leon's campaign, the secure unit that the virus is stored in is already open, while in Claire's campaign it is sealed unless opened with Sherry's pendant. So if Leon arrived first, he couldn't reach the G-Virus sample. Also, the self-destruct announcement would have gone off before Claire arrived at the east wing of the lab. But also, if you go through Claire's second run and look inside the cabinet, you will see there's still a G-Virus sample left that Leon should have picked up already, which was the final one inside the casing. It's these little details that have made fans of the original game go sour on the remake, feeling as if not enough care and attention has been put into building what should have been a fantastic remake. Okay, it would have some highlights, but it fell short of being one of the best Resident Evil games in the series. All it would take would be a few fixes to the use of key items and key encounters, and some plot tweaks and a bit more world building. But how this could have been fixed, we'll have to wait for another time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, a like would be very welcome. Also, please do subscribe and ring the bell to keep up to date with new Resident Evil content. Comment down below with your thoughts on the Resident Evil 2 remake. Thank you everyone, stay safe, and I'll see you all again soon.